The clouds over Atlanta turned dark and heavy. Thunder rolled like drums. Rain started to fall, tapping fast on the big glass windows of the wedding hall. White flowers stood in tall glass vases. Chairs were lined in perfect rows. A soft love song played, but nobody was smiling anymore. People looked at their watches. Some stood. Some whispered. The groom stood near the altar, wearing a black suit and shiny shoes. His hands shook. He looked at his phone. No message. No call. He looked at the clock on the wall. She should be here by now. He stepped outside. The rain hit his face. A black car had just arrived, but it was not the bride. Inside the hall, the whispers grew louder. The bride is missing. Somebody ran to the groom. She's not answering her phone. Another voice. She's not in the dressing room. Back in the city, far from the wedding hall, a small window let in a little light. A white wedding dress lay crumpled on the floor. Shoes in the corner. A girl sat by the door, her knees to her chest, her makeup smudged with tears. Her name was Adesawa. Her face was red from crying. Her fingers scratched at the wooden door. She pulled the handle again and again. Locked. No one answered. She looked at the time on the wall. Her wedding was starting. But she was not there. Because someone had locked her in. And that someone was her own mother. 3 months before the wedding, in a quiet part of Charlotte, North Carolina, the smell of fried plantain and fresh pepper soup filled a small African food store. The wooden sign above the door read Mama Yuzo's Market. Inside, Adesawa stood behind the counter, tying a white apron around her waist. Her soft curls were pulled back, and beads of sweat shined on her forehead. She was helping her mother, Mama Yuzo, who stood in the back, shouting prices and counting yams. The doorbell rang. A tall man in a clean shirt walked in, carrying a laptop bag and a bottle of water. His name was Jordan. He was visiting Charlotte for a big tech conference. He looked around, curious. He smiled when he saw Adesawa. Their eyes met. Her heart beat faster. She looked down. He asked for jollof rice. She pointed him to the hot pot near the window. He picked a drink too. As he paid, his fingers brushed hers. A spark. The next week, they met again at a cultural event. There was music, dancing, people in African clothes. Adesawa wore a yellow Ankara dress. Jordan wore a navy blue agbada. They laughed. They danced. They sat under the tent eating puff-puff, talking like old friends. Love grew. But love had no space at home. Mama Yuzo watched from the window. Her eyes sharp like blades. Her arms crossed. She asked questions. Who is this man? Where is he from? What does he want? Why so fast? Jordan came to the store again. This time, Mama Yuzo did not smile. She stood tall in her head wrap, her eyes full of fire. She didn't speak, but her silence said everything. She didn't like him. She didn't want him near her daughter. At night, Mama Yuzo sat in the living room, counting rosary beads, whispering old prayers in Igbo. She said things about bloodlines, about curses, about protecting her only child. But Adesawa didn't stop seeing Jordan. She met him in secret. He took her to dinner. He sent her flowers. He showed her a side of life she had never seen. He was kind. He listened. He believed in her dreams. In Atlanta, while visiting for a tech gala, Jordan got down on one knee under fairy lights on a rooftop. He pulled out a small box. A gold ring sparkled inside. Adesawa's hands covered her mouth. She nodded. A secret engagement. A secret plan. The wedding was set for summer, back in Atlanta. A quiet, simple event. But one thing was missing, Mama Yuzo. Adesawa told her only 1 week before. The reaction came fast. A smashed glass. A scream. A door slammed. Silence. That night, Mama Yuzo made phone calls. She sat on her bed, the room dark, a candle burning beside a photo of her late husband. Her voice low. sharp. She spoke in Igbo, fast and firm. 1 call. 2 calls. 3. Every word was clear. She would stop the wedding. She would stop it by any means. The sun in Atlanta, Georgia, shone bright through the big windows of a quiet Airbnb. Inside, the house smelled like vanilla and fresh flowers. Dresses hung neatly on the wall. White shoes sat in boxes. Laughter filled the room. Adesawa stood in front of the mirror. Her skin glowed. Her eyes were full of light. Her friend, Nia, curled her hair gently and hummed a soft song. They were both excited. The wedding was just a few hours away. Downstairs, someone knocked on the door. Nia peeked out the window. Mama Yuzo stood there with a large blue cooler and a folded wrapper in her arms. Nia paused. She looked at Adesawa. Adesawa bit her lip, then nodded. Nia opened the door. Mama Yuzo walked in quietly. Her face was soft. Her voice was gentle. She smiled. She hugged her daughter for a long time. She said she was sorry. She brought bitter leaf soup. She brought wrappers from the village. She said she wanted to help her daughter look like a true African bride. Adesawa's eyes watered. She smiled back. For the first time, her mother felt warm again. They ate. They laughed a little. They prayed together. Night came. Nia's phone rang. The makeup artist had just landed at the airport. Adesawa told Nia to go and bring her. Nia picked up her keys and left. The door closed. Silence. Mama Yuzo stood and walked to the kitchen. She opened her bag. She pulled out a small, wrapped bottle. She poured a brown powder into a cup of warm tea. She brought the cup to Adesawa. Adesawa drank slowly, her hands shaking slightly from the long day. The tea was bitter. Mama Yuzo smiled. Within minutes, Adesawa's head began to feel heavy. She tried to stand, but her legs wobbled. She tried to speak, but her lips felt weak. The last thing she saw was her mother's face, looking down at her. Then darkness. Morning light crept through pink curtains. Birds chirped softly outside. Adesawa's eyes blinked open. She wasn't in the Airbnb. She wasn't in Atlanta. She was back in Charlotte, North Carolina. Back in her old room. Her childhood posters still on the wall. Her small bookshelf still full of school books. Her old teddy bear sitting by the window. She sat up fast. Her head spun. She looked around. Her wedding dress was gone. Her phone was gone. The door was shut. She ran to it. She turned the knob. Locked. She hit it with her fists. She screamed. No answer. Then, footsteps. Slow. Steady. The door creaked open just a little. A woman stepped in. She wore white clothes. Her head was wrapped in a scarf. Her hands held a wooden staff and a bowl of herbs. Her eyes did not blink. She walked in without a word. She sat on the floor. She lit a stick of smoke. She began to chant. The language was old. Her voice was deep. The room smelled of fire, oil, and fear. Behind her, Mama Yuzo stood quietly. Her face looked harder than stone. She said nothing at first. Then she placed a folded paper on the bed. It was a wedding invitation. It had Adesawa's name on it. Mama Yuzo looked at her daughter. She said she had seen something in her dream. She said this wedding would open a curse that was buried long ago. She said spirits had spoken to her in the night. She said Adesawa would die if she married Jordan. She said she would not let that happen. She said Adesawa was not getting married today. Not tomorrow. Not ever. Back in Atlanta, the wedding hall had emptied. Rain still fell hard against the windows. Tables were untouched. Flowers sagged in the wind. The guests had left. The cake stood alone. Jordan sat on a chair with his hands on his head. His phone rang again. Still no answer. His heart beat fast. His mind spun. Where was she? Nia ran back in, soaking wet, holding her phone tight. Her face was pale. Her lips shook. She said something about Mama Yuzo. Said she had been acting strange. Quiet, too quiet. Moving around in the shadows. Watching Adesawa all night like a guard dog. Jordan stood quickly. They grabbed their bags. Nia remembered something. The Uber driver. He had picked up Mama Yuzo the night before, said something about driving a long way. They pulled up the ride history. The trip ended in Charlotte, North Carolina. Jordan's eyes widened. They got into the car and started the engine. The tires splashed through puddles as they sped onto the highway. Lightning cracked the sky. Thunder roared like drums. Wind pushed against the windows. But Jordan didn't slow down. The road was long and wet. Trees passed like ghosts. Nia held on to her seat, her eyes never leaving the road ahead. Then Jordan spoke. He told her something he had never told Adesawa. He was adopted. As a child, he had been left at a church in Houston, Texas, with no name, no papers. Just a necklace with a carved symbol on it. Last year, after years of searching, he had found out the truth. He came from a royal family in Nigeria. A line that was believed to have vanished after the war. The symbol on his necklace matched the crest of the Obiaker clan, a name Mama Yuzo once whispered in fear. Jordan believed that was why she wanted to stop the wedding. Because she knew who he truly was. And she was afraid. Afraid of what the union could mean. Afraid of what old secrets would come out. They drove faster. Rain washed over the windshield like tears. By morning, they arrived in Charlotte. The sun had not risen yet. Fog rolled over the streets like smoke. They knocked on doors. They showed pictures. They asked everyone. At a small market near an old train station, an old woman with a scarf on her head looked closely at Adesawa's photo. She nodded slowly. She said she had seen that face. Said the girl's mother came around sometimes to buy roots and bitter herbs. She pointed toward a long dirt road behind the market. At the end of the road was a faded yellow house, with chickens in the yard and a cracked water drum. Jordan and Nia walked slowly toward it. A man sat on a bench, peeling oranges. They asked him if Mama Yuzo lived there. The man nodded without looking up. Then he said something that made Nia freeze. He said this was not the first time. He said the woman had locked up her daughter before. Said it was her way. Said it was how she kept control. The sky over Charlotte was still gray. A thin mist covered the trees. Jordan and Nia stood in front of the yellow house. The roof was bent in places. The windows were covered with cloth. They stepped closer. The front door was shut tight. Jordan pushed the handle. It did not move. He pushed again. Harder. Something blocked it from the inside. He looked around. No sound. No movement. Then, from inside the house, a faint noise. A soft cry. A thump. A girl's voice. Muffled. Adesawa. She was inside. Her hands were tied. Her mouth covered with cloth. She tried to scream, but her voice came out like a whisper. Her heart raced. She heard footsteps outside. She kicked the wall. Again. Again. Inside the room, Mama Yuzo stood in the middle of a red mat. She held a clay pot filled with ashes, feathers, and oil. Beside her, the spiritual woman wore black beads and white paint on her face. Smoke filled the air. Candles flickered. They began the ritual. They sang. They clapped. They called names from the past. They said they were removing the spirit of marriage. They said they were saving her from death. Adesawa tried to scream again. But her mouth was tight. She cried. Her eyes full of fear. Her body shaking. Outside, Jordan stepped back. He rushed to the side of the house. He found a metal pole. He ran at the door. Boom. Boom. Once more. The door flew open. The wind rushed in. Candles blew out. Mama Yuzo turned sharply. The spiritual woman gasped. Jordan stood in the doorway, wet from the rain, breath heavy. He looked straight at Adesawa. He ran to her and untied her hands. She collapsed into his arms. Mama Yuzo screamed. She picked up the pot and threw it across the room. Ashes filled the air. She shouted that her daughter would die. She shouted that this man was cursed. She shouted that spirits had warned her. She pointed at Jordan with shaking hands. But Jordan stood still. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out a gold necklace. It shone in the candlelight. Adesawa had worn it once, years ago. Mama Yuzo froze. The symbol on the necklace, it was familiar. A spiral sun, wrapped in 3 small circles. She took a step back. Her lips trembled. The spiritual woman walked forward. She looked at the necklace. She touched the symbol gently. Her eyes grew wide. She dropped to her knees. She whispered something under her breath. She looked up at Mama Yuzo. She said he was the one? Mama Yuzo shook her head. No, she mouthed silently. But her knees gave way. She fainted. She fell to the floor, arms spread out like wings. Silence. Only the sound of the wind and the heartbeat of 2 lovers. Adesawa stood. Jordan held her hand. The spiritual woman looked at them, her eyes still full of wonder. She said that many years ago, during the Nigerian Civil War, a boy had pulled Mama Yuzo from the rubble of a burning home. That boy wore the same necklace. That boy vanished after saving her. Now, he had returned, in a new body. Same eyes. Same spirit. Same soul. Jordan, the one she tried to stop, was the one who once saved her life. The rain had stopped. The sky over Charlotte began to clear. Inside the small yellow house, the candles had gone out. The smoke had faded. The spiritual woman sat quietly, her head bowed. Mama Yuzo still lay on the floor, chest rising slowly. Adesawa stood up with shaking legs. Her dress was torn. Her hair messy. But her heart beat strong again. Jordan held her gently. They walked out of the house. Together. The road back to Atlanta was quiet. No music. No words. Just the sound of the tires on wet ground. Adesawa stared out the window. Jordan glanced at her hand resting in his. She was safe. That was all that mattered. They didn't go back to the wedding hall. The flowers were gone. The guests had left. The cake had melted. But their love had not. They didn't talk about rings or dances or vows. They just held each other. In silence. 6 months passed. Birds sang in the sky over a small garden in Stone Mountain, Georgia. Trees stood tall. Flowers bloomed. The air was warm. A white arch was built with simple ribbons. Chairs were placed in a circle. No stage. No lights. No show. Just close friends. Just soft music. Just peace. Adesawa walked slowly across the grass, holding a small bouquet. Jordan waited under the arch, wearing a cream-colored suit. Beside him stood Nia, smiling brightly. Adesawa reached him. They faced each other. Hands touched. Hearts quieted. Then, a sound. Footsteps. Everyone turned. A woman walked in alone. She wore a traditional white wrapper and held her hands in front of her. Mama Yuzo. She looked smaller now. Softer. She walked up to her daughter. She looked into her eyes. Then she whispered one line. Her voice low. Her face full of tears. She said she was wrong. She said she was only trying to protect. Adesawa looked at her for a long moment. Then she reached out and hugged her. Mama Yuzo cried into her shoulder. The music played again. The couple turned to face the guests. They nodded. They said, "I do." Everyone clapped. Joy returned. Love won. As they walked out of the garden, birds flew above the trees. Laughter filled the air. Then, a small voice. A little girl ran up the path. She wore a yellow dress. Her hair tied in 2 puffs. She ran straight toward Jordan. She smiled wide. She called him Uncle. Her voice was loud. Sure. Sweet. Jordan looked confused. He bent down and hugged her. She looked up at him with the same eyes, the same cheeks, the same smile. As Adesawa, Nia stood at the side. Her eyes followed the girl. She leaned in close. She whispered softly, "She's not your niece." Jordan turned to her. Nia nodded slowly. "She's your blood." Jordan froze. Adesawa placed her hand on his chest. Tears filled his eyes. And then he smiled. Would you forgive a mother who locked you up on your wedding day? Comment below what you would have done in Adesawa's shoes. Subscribe for more mind-blowing African folktales set in the heart of American cities. Don't forget to like, share, and turn on that bell icon.